Before we get going today, I just want to say a big thank you to today's sponsor, Talkspace. When you put your mental and emotional health first, especially in these uncertain times, it has the positive trickle-down effect of making everything else in your life better. Your relationships get stronger and your self-worth grows. These are just a few reasons why working with a therapist to finally prioritize my mental health has truly changed my life for the better, across the board, no question. With Talkspace, you set goals with your therapist and they hold you accountable and make sure you're really progressing. Therapy can really help you shift your perspective, find tools to cope in difficult times, and really be a guiding light. Moreover, Talkspace is a fraction of the cost of in-person therapy. Instead of waiting for an appointment, you can send unlimited messages to your therapist 24/7 and they'll engage with you daily, 5 days a week. Talkspace has thousands of licensed therapists with years of experience in over 40 specialties, including depression, anxiety, substance abuse, trauma, anger management, relationship issues, food and eating, and so much more. And as a listener of this podcast, you'll get $100 off your first month with Talkspace. To match with a licensed therapist today, go to Talkspace.com. Make sure to use the code CHILL to get $100 off your first month and show your support for the show. That's chill in Talkspace.com. And welcome back to the Chilluminati podcast, episode 97. As always, I am one of your hosts, Mike Martin, joined by my two co-hosts, Alex Fasciane and Jesse Cox. Hello, boys.
Yo.
Bop, bop. I don't even know how to respond to
bippity boppity boo. You just got to picture me sliding in like Kramer. Bop, bop, bop. What's up? Do we like it?
This is a deep cut that not all listeners are going to get. I don't know how deep it is, but am I supposed to call you like Toomgis now? People keep telling me.
Get out of here with the Toomgis. Get out of here, dude. I'm so glad this is just, you just have to hear me in this and never see me.
From now on, just imagine that Alex is made of junk food and he has like a hamburger nose and Cheetos for a beard.
If the Swamp Thing like was made out of a dumpster in the back of a McDonald's. Like it looks like
wait, what?
It looks like shit, man. He
Too much
looks
good
like
stuff.
His arms are like fucking big ass cups. It sucks.
All right, we've lost at least half of our audience here. So
it sucks.
Got to bring it back. Got to bring it back. Thank you guys so much for listening. We're excited to bring in the next episode. But before we do, Alex, rather, people have suggested.
Okay, you're about to make me do a thing? Nah.
No, this isn't yours. This is an Alex thing.
This is my burden to bear.
This is your burden to bear. But like, I like the name of the segment can just simply be called the Chilluminati.
Chilluminati.
That's been suggested multiple times now on the Reddit this week.
Well,
We're not shilling.
The Chilluminati is a very private organization.
I'm not shilling.
That's the thing, you know. The Chilluminati, it's a little bit more exclusive. They don't have a public-facing podcast. It's just for members. It's similar show, but they don't have weekly episodes.
Yeah,
they don't have good like monthly art. They don't give pre-sale on stuff. They don't get access to a Discord like our incredible Patreon, which you can go to at patreon.com/ChilluminatiPod. I hesitate to call it a Wonderland, but I don't know why, because it really is.
Yeah, so why would you hold back? Why would you hold back on the truth?
I think it's just my, quiet, demure nature, but you know what? Fuck it. It's a Wonderland. Patreon.com/ChilluminatiPod. It's a Wonderland.
Give us your money and join the Wonderland, dude. Come join the Wonderland with your cat.
Get on in there and find out what I mean by that.
And then after you do so, go buy a uniform over at theyeti.com/collection/Chilluminati. We've got t-shirts, posters. Okay. The Jeff the Mongoose t-shirt, isn't that shit great?
The Jeff shirt is awesome. The long sleeve is awesome. Sick. That's like a whole, like if you love the X-Files opening credits, that's your shirt. You know what I mean? So good. And then look at the moth pin.
The Mothman pin. He's so adorable. Go grab it. The Mothman pin. He's a cute boy. He can be like our mascot.
Have you seen him, Jesse?
I have. I'm sorry. I was busy thinking about Wonderland and what creatures we would be if we were in Wonderland. And obviously, Alex is a dormouse. I'm a
dormouse?
Oh, wow. You're the dormouse, obviously.
I would say that's actually like, you're the first person in like 10 years who hasn't been like, you know who you remind me of? That fucking stoned ass, goofy ass caterpillar.
No. You're the dormouse. You're the dormouse.
I'll take that.
Mathis is the Jabberwocky. Easy Jabberwocky. Easy.
That's fine. I'm
Clean
cool
beans.
with that.
Yeah.
Who are you?
Me, I've always felt that I was one of those oysters. You know what I'm saying?
The sad little oysters?
Yeah, the sad little oysters.
The trusting little baby oysters?
Yeah, that's what I've thought about myself.
Devoured by a giant walrus?
Yeah, that or who's the guy who hangs out with the walrus?
The carpenter.
Yeah. Maybe I'm the carpenter. That or the rabbit. One of the two. I could be anyone.
You're multifaceted, Jesse.
But Mathis is definitely the Jabberwocky, 100%.
It's
Okay,
no
all right.
Sneaky snack or whatever the hell Jabberwocky does. The Bandersnatch, one of those damn things.
Tungus, AM, PM
I'm going to Bandersnatch your attention, and we've got to shift gears right here because it's time for part 2, boys, of the final part of the Betty and Barney Hill story. If you don't recall, when last we left the hills, they had just experienced a weird UFO occurrence followed by a chunk of missing time. They saw a strange upward falling star in the distance that danced and moved like a paddle ball. It would dip below the tree line and above it, seemingly following them before briefly disappearing and then swooping directly in front of their car, forcing them to turn off the main highway onto a dirt road, attempting to escape whatever this large orange ball of light was. What immediately followed was a series of intense buzzing, which is where their memories begin to black out, only to be regained again with another series of intense buzzing on the car. After they made it home, and out of their clothing, which was all scuffed and ripped and dirty, they had realized 2 hours of time had suddenly disappeared, where once they were supposed to arrive at 3:30 in the morning, they ended up arriving at 5:30. The following days were filled with confusion, bizarre experiments on the car, and discussions with Betty's family, a physicist, and long discussions with Pease Air Force Base and Project Blue Book directly in the days that followed.
Wait. What going on with the car? Experiments?
Yeah, remember they brought the compass outside.
Oh,
and
right. Okay. Yeah.
Little like magnetic experiments that had the needle all spinning and stuff.
Yes.
All of this in the fruitless search and hope that they would find answers and figure out what happened in that 2-hour chunk of time. And by the end of 1961, the Hills had been no closer to an answer than they were the day after they had gotten home on just how to remember what happened during that gap of time. All the while, Barney couldn't help but feel like something had happened to his genitals. But when he inspected them,
ain't that just the way?
Yeah, it's just how it happens.
There, I feel something.
Something feels weird about my nuts.
I'm gonna go to the doctor.
But he never ever found any physical evidence for that first almost year or so of anything having happened at all until the end of 1961, where wart-like growths grew in a circle around the front of his genitals.
Wait, so it took time for this to happen?
Yeah, it did not show up right away. It took months. It took months for it to show up. All right,
we need to ask this question. I got to be the one. When you say in a circular pattern around his genitals, we talking like on the ding dong or like where are we talking? So it's like on the ding dong in a circle,
the dick itself,
around the circumference.
Yep, around the circle.
Around the circle.
In a circle around the tip, like up toward the front.
In a circle, in a perfect circle.
If you were cutting a zucchini in half, would you throw this part away?
I haven't cooked a zucchini, so what part of the zucchini?
I don't want to blow you up.
The end of a zucchini.
Yes, you would cut this part away. You would toss it.
Now here's my question.
Yeah.
Were the bumps like
they were? We'll get to them because they were
not a synergy. What's the word I'm looking at? What is the word? I don't know. Like a face.
A symphony.
Like one half of the face is
symmetry.
Symmetry. Thank you.
They were not perfectly symmetrical, as far as my understanding.
But there were multiple little bumps in a perfect circle.
Multiple, and they were removed and tested, and we'll talk about that when we get there.
But it was like a perfect circle.
It was a circle, yes, around. Yes, correct. It was a circle around the dick, but it was not. Mention in the research
to families, but this is important. I need to know this because
there was no mention of it being perfectly
if this is a little STD-ish or if it's aliens, what I'm saying?
Magical, yeah.
Well, we'll get to that. I know. I promise you, we'll answer that question.
If you tell me in the end that this man got like an STD and that's what this was, I'll be real upset. I'm gonna be real pissed off at all of ufology. I'm gonna be so mad.
Just 2 episodes to just be like,
I'm gonna be
it was an STD.
How dare you?
No. it's so crazy because up until this detail of the story, I can imagine like with perfect cinema visuals, like everything that happened. You know what I mean? Like, like we say, you know, it's a very influential UFO story. And because of that, like all the imagery that's out there, like in movies and TV, it like helps me imagine like this whole story perfectly. And then it's like, and then he grew a perfect circle of warts around his dick months later. And you're like, huh? What?
Unfortunately, and we're going to get to it. Barney, out of the two of them, Barney had the worst of the experiences in terms of his abduction and the health effects that ended up happening afterward. This kind of wart-like situation kind of begins Barney's approximate 8-year health tumble that eventually ends with Barney's passing. As the years continued, Barney begins to suffer from intense headaches, insomnia, high blood pressure, and an ulcer that would not respond to traditional treatment. As for the growths that he had, at first the doctor had assumed it was venereal warts. However, after they were removed and looked at, it was determined that this is not what they were. They were actually unsure as to what caused them or what they were, but they were benign and simply removed for cosmetic purposes. All the while, Barney struggled with his new job and commute and the constant concern of their story getting out and ruining their reputation. To top it off, as the months turned into years and the Hills' search for help continued, Betty began to have horrible nightmares, waking up screaming and shouting in her sleep, crying and confused. According to Betty, the dream itself was reoccurring but always disjointed. Some nights the nightmares would be taking place aboard a mysterious craft as beings forced experiments upon her, while other times the nightmare took place in their car as they were taken away, but rarely in a sequence that made sense. They eventually would book an appointment with a psychiatrist in March of 1962 by the name of Patrick Quirk, who, upon hearing their story, simply said the pair should just wait it out and hope the memories returned on their own. By 1963, Barney's health had deteriorated to such a degree that he had to take a 3-month leave of absence from work. When he was brought to the doctor, they could find nothing wrong whatsoever and were convinced that his sicknesses were just psychosomatic. Yet no matter how much that they treated his ulcers, they would not close, continually causing him pain. And yet, they continued to search for answers for that missing time all the while, hoping it would come one day. And they would, nearly 4 years after the event took place, when they were referred to a Dr. Benjamin Simon, a psychiatrist who specialized in hypnosis. They first consulted with Dr. Simon on December 14th, 1963. And even though the doctor was skeptical about the existence of UFOs, he took on the Hills because he believed that whatever had happened, breaking through to it would at the very least help with Barney's health. Dr. Simon's history as a psychiatrist and with hypnosis was actually completely entrenched in helping returning soldiers combat their PTSD. And his results had been good, where he was able to effectively help alleviate the symptoms of the PTSD that his patients were experiencing.
Can I ask what the current thoughts are on this? Do we have
Yeah, we're gonna cover hypnosis here in a little bit and just talk about what it scientifically does, that kind of thing. So with a doctor in hand and some hope for finding answers, the Hills began their 3 weeks of initial conditioning where Dr. Simon would slowly bring them further and further into deeper and deeper trance-like states, easing them into the process before even touching the traumatic events that occurred. While Betty and Barney were both able to be placed into hypnotic trances, it's important to note that Betty's was noticeably less deep than Barney's. So here's where we're going to actually talk a little bit about what hypnosis is, what it isn't, what it can do, and what you should take from anybody who goes to hypnosis for therapy. So first of all, let's be clear. This podcast is not a science podcast. In case you boys weren't aware, we don't do science stuff.
You're saying those pies aren't actually the best pies?
I mean, will we get a Lake City quiet pill if we don't say
we
they're
did a whole episode about a talking mongoose. So
scientifically research talking mongoose.
Just reminding everyone.
I read the articles on the internet that I stole it from. Yeah.
But no, with that out there, that disclaimer, I'm going to do my best to say in layman's terms what hypnosis does and what it's good for, as I imagine there are a ton of misconceptions out there about what hypnosis actually is.
Question.
Yes.
Can I use it to make someone fall in love with me? Like some sort of erotic fiction? No. Okay.
Not at all. That's not at all how it works.
Through Pornhub? Like in the comments?
Yeah, through
like
the
in the
videos.
comment section?
I'm just saying, I've been given hope, and that's not the case. You can't trick someone into loving you.
No,
is that
unfortunate?
What?
I know. You lie. All the lies out there. We're gonna dash them, Jesse, so you can find love with truth on your side and not having to mind control somebody.
Oh man, here I was, all these years of hypnotic courses.
So
how much did you spend a lot of money on that?
I mean, a lot is a relative term.
Okay.
Right. How much is a lot when you're searching for love?
Yeah,
in the end?
and
I don't
by
want to know.
searching
It's
for
going to
love, I
depress
mean
me.
like
I don't want to know how much
stalking.
it is.
What?
It's going to depress me no
That's
matter
where
what
all
the
the
number is.
Chilluminati money goes, by the way. That's where all Chilluminati money goes for Jesse.
Thanks for your support. It's all been funneled into me learning hypnosis. I have not. I'm so sorry.
It's him and a guy with like paper curtains on Venice Boulevard.
The guy in Santa Monica with the snake wrapped around him on the pier. He's been trying to teach
white
me.
linens. He has a
Yeah, he's
big
been using the
ass
snake to
brooch.
hypnotize me, but it's weird.
Well, we'll talk about that misconception in a second. But the first one I want to address is that hypnotherapy is a bunch of bullshit and doesn't work at all. This is incorrect. It does work. Hypnotherapy has helped countless people, from simple things like adjusting behavior for a habit they didn't like trying to quit smoking.
I know a couple people who've done that. Yeah.
Has it worked for them?
One person really 100% it worked, and for another person they ended up smoking again.
Yep, makes sense.
I mean, do they tell you about what factors? I mean, do they just come out of it like, I no longer require cigarettes? Like what happened?
I don't really know.
Yeah, I don't think Alex knows. I imagine it's over the course of many weeks and months, continual subtle conditioning, suggestibility that, so like building a bad behavior, like when you pick up a cigarette, you kind of get like the sick feeling.
Maybe they just weren't into smoking to begin with, and they didn't maybe they were like poser smokers.
If anybody listeners have like experience with hypnotherapy, please throw your experience up on the subreddit or something. I'd love to read about it.
Yeah, I know nothing about it at all, truly.
And I only know what I read on science and science articles and shit. So it's all
conceptually it seems wild. But yes. I do know that for some people it does work. So I feel like there has to be something to it.
Brains are weird, man.
The problem
That's what it boils down to,
most hypnotizers, hypnotists. Thank you. The problem is most
hypnotherapists.
The problem is most mind masters will tell
Mesmelords.
They'll tell you that you have to be willing to like let yourself be hypnotized.
Yes,
which to me is always the first like, wait, is this real? Like when you have to say something like that, that's why I'm like, when I hear people it works for, I'm like, how? I just don't get it.
Not a lot of people can it work. Well, I have a number for you here in a minute on how many people can, in general speaking, can actually are suggestible like that.
Sure.
Unfortunately, though, Jesse, as this next kind of topic, hypnosis is not mind control. At no point is the person undergoing hypnotherapy being mind wiped or made some sort of Manchurian candidate.
Even
the more theatrical hypnosis tricks, like making someone like a food they don't normally like, ends up wearing out, usually within a few hours.
So what you're saying is the class that's probably listening to this episode, it's not what I said earlier.
Right.
Your teacher thanked them for inviting you to listen to this episode.
We are now an educational podcast.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, we're now educational, and I've ruined that for everyone. Hey,
if it was 15 years ago, the government would be partially funding this podcast.
You are correct. So hypnosis is not mind control. It is a state of deep suggestion, and each person is not at all affected by hypnosis the same as any other person. In fact, only approximately about 30% of the population on Earth is suggestible in hypnosis enough for it to even be performed on them in this level. And even within that 30%, the degree at which some can be brought into a trance-like state varies, as we'll see when, like Betty and Barney. They are both suggestible, but Barney is much more suggestible than Betty ended up being. However, hypnosis doesn't immediately also bring out truth. For instance, you can't take a criminal who refuses to tell the truth, throw him into a hypnosis chamber, and bring out the truth with hypnosis and use it as evidence in court. What hypnosis does is bring out what the person perceives to be the truth. While Betty and Barney may have well and truly had an otherworldly experience, it is also possible that they encountered some form of government testing or abduction in that case, as we had discussed last episode. But the brain does wild things when it experiences trauma, and the brain chemistry physically changes when a human being is put through intense trauma. So if they were betrayed or abused by our own government that night, their minds may have changed to aliens for some reason or another. The brain maybe just accepted it easier for them. And if they weren't going to be allowed to forget, then the brain automatically would register and change the people into these alien-like creatures. I'm not saying that this is what happened. A lot of things don't line up for that to necessarily be the case, but you get the idea. This is what hypnosis does, would bring forward the idea to them. The aliens were real. And so that's the memory you get when put under hypnosis. Moreover, it's also pretty easy to generate fake memories while under hypnotherapy if the hypnotherapist isn't being careful, and this is why you always want to go with a professional. When in an easily suggestible state, you want your questions and directions to be clear, concise, and as neutral as possible. Anything other than that can lead and sort of taint the questions and answers, leading to answers that might make sense under the context of the question. For example, if Betty said something like, "They came to our car," the therapist might want to say, "What happens next?" as opposed to, "What do the people do next?" One simply urges you to move forward with information, while the other implies that the figures did do something next. And so she might make up what those things ended up doing. If they do you understand the example I'm kind of giving here?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
It's like very like just sort of like you're almost like acting.
You're guiding them. You don't want to push them in a direction or direct them. Yeah, being like a director and being like, "I want you to tell me what the people did next." You got to let them do their own thing.
It's kind of like a improv exercise.
In a way.
Yeah.
So going into hypnotherapy sessions, it's just important to kind of keep all that in mind when it comes to what hypnosis and hypnotherapy actually does. After 3 weeks of preparation, beginning on February 22nd, 1964, Dr. Simon began doing individual hypnotic regressions with the Hills, keeping them separate so they would not taint one another's sessions themselves. The sessions lasted were once a week over the course of 6 months. And by the end, Dr. Simon had concluded that while he still wasn't sure if what they experienced was truly otherworldly in nature, he was certain that they both truly believed it to be true. A quick thank you to today's sponsor, Honey. And listen, we all shop online, and we've all seen that promo code field taunt us at checkout. But thanks to Honey, manually searching for coupon codes is a thing of the past. Honey is the free shopping tool that scours the internet for promo codes and applies the best one it finds to your cart. Honey even supports over 30,000 stores online. That's a huge number of stores. And I personally actually recently used Honey when I bought my new PC online. It cycled through about 30 different codes and applied the ones that still worked, bringing me down a couple $100s. Imagine you're shopping for one of your favorite sites, and when you check out, the Honey button drops down, and all you have to do is click Apply Coupons. Wait a few seconds as Honey searches for coupons it can find for the site, and if Honey finds any working coupons, you'll just watch the price drop. Honey has found its over 17 million members over $2 billion in savings. If you don't already have Honey, you could be straight up missing out on free savings. It's literally free and installs in seconds. And by getting it, you'll be doing yourself a solid and supporting this podcast. I'd never recommend anything I don't use, so get Honey for free at joinhoney.com/chill. That's joinhoney.com/chill. What I'm going to do is take the event and retell it from the moment of the buzzing on the car and put it in chronological order. But it's important to note that as they were going through this in therapy, this did not come out in chronological order. Events would come forth before others over the course of the 6 months until the whole picture had been formed.
And this is all based on hypnotic regression?
But yeah, both of their accounts over the course of multiple. And you can actually go listen to most of it online. The whole thing isn't made available online, but you can get the transcript of the whole thing if you wanted to pretty easily nowadays.
It's a little harrowing at points.
It's very harrowing. We got a couple more clips we'll be playing this episode of Betty this time around.
I'm excited for this.
So, yeah. So, and I just want to reiterate, I feel bad for Barney during all this. Dude got shafted in this abduction. If this is like, just to take the story at its face value, poor Barney had a bad time, dude. Barney compared to Betty especially.
It really sounds like he did.
It's miserable, but it's kind of funny at some point. So here's what happened next, according to, so as Barney turned off the highway onto the dirt road, which is where we're going to pick up, The car was hit with that intense vibrations, and that's when their conscious memory fades. So here's what happened next, according to Barney in one of his therapy sessions. Quote, I made a turn and I never knew this. I don't know why I had to make that turn. I was lost. I saw I was on a strange area of highway and I had never been there before. And I was being stopped. I was very uncomfortable, but somehow the eyes were telling me that I should be calm and that I would not be harmed and to relax. And I saw these men coming down the road toward me. So when he talks about his eyes, what Barney's talking about is all the while when he's having these thoughts of like, don't be violent, behave, like just kind of go along with it. He says he feels the presence of like these eyes pressuring into his own eyes. And they're kind of like suggesting him to kind of do what he's doing. That's how he turns off the car initially and all this stuff. He feels like he's supposed to. At this point in the session, Dr. Simon asks him if he is certain he didn't dream this or make this up. And Barney replies rather emphatically that this is not a dream and this did happen. With trees on both sides of them, they were stopped by a group of men at the curve of the road they had found themselves on. As Barney brought the vehicle to a stop, the group of men began walking toward them, separating into two groups, flanking both sides of the car. As they approached, Barney tried to start the car and get away. But it's then that he realized that the car was completely dead and refused to start or turn over. Barney told Betty he thought it was the men from the craft that he saw earlier in the field. Remember, he saw them through in the binoculars from last episode, which caused Betty to immediately begin weeping. Betty wanted to run and reached for the car door handle, only for the car door to be opened as she grasped onto it by the men who were now immediately outside the car door on both sides. Barney didn't move, but remembered thinking not to reach for his gun, that if he did so, that he would be harmed. His car door then opened as well, and he felt eyes get incredibly close to him until he closed his eyes completely and fell into a trance-like state after a little bit of fighting. There were 3 initially, but eventually 6 on Barney's side and 4 on Betty's, with one standing a bit further back observing the whole scenario would play out. And what they saw might ring a few bells for alien aficionados out there. They were small, bald men, no more than 5 feet tall, with a large head and large almond-shaped eyes that went just to the sides of their head. Their eyes were completely black. They had slits for mouths with a type of membrane that seemed to waggle over their mouth when they spoke to each other in their native
like
language,
Zoidberg.
whatever that might be. Yeah, yes, it kind of, yes. And they had tiny flat slits for noses. Their bodies had larger than average chests with just disproportionate arms and legs. They all wore jumpsuits as well, and they were your mostly classic gray aliens. After the doors opened, they each were put in a slight trance state where it seemed like they were aware of what they were doing, but they had no control over it. Barney, though, like I said, didn't want to go down easy and tried to fight them off when they opened the door. However, the fight didn't last long before he was quickly also put into that trance-like state. 2 of the creatures placed their arms around Barney, whose eyes had now been closed, and they pulled him from the vehicle, dragging him forward toward the glowing ship. But only his feet dragged, causing the scuff on his shoes. For small creatures, they had incredible strength, it seemed. Betty had a bit of a better experience coming out of the car, as one of the Greys simply placed out his hand and Betty fell into a small trance, leaving the car willingly and being escorted by the group of figures, not carried away like Barney.
This would be literally, I can't think of something scarier than that.
Yeah, it's rough. It's all very strange too. It only gets stranger. As they began walking,
can I ask you a question?
Yes, please.
You mentioned something that is driving me crazy.
Yes.
That the way they described these aliens
is
familiar to a lot of people because it's like the universal, this is what aliens are like. Is this the first technical alien encounter?
I mean,
like of the third kind?
With this vibe.
Of this detail, yeah.
But like
I think there's been there and they hung out with the aliens.
Yeah.
Because like I'm curious if this is one of those like chicken egg scenarios where the reason we all associate it with it is because this was the first and everyone else is just like, yeah. No, they're little tiny gray dudes. And right? Is that
that's exactly the question about this case, right? It's like this is the one, right? Like this is the case in every way. Like a couple driving around a road, there's a bright light, something's following them, they like lose time, they like feel extremely violated by these little bald dudes. Like you know,
there's other encounters across the world of bizarre kind of alien encounters, but this is the first one, like Alex was saying there, this is the first one that is widely publicized like this and has this known template going forward. At the very least, the first time this template of an abduction scenario is put on the public stage to this degree. This is like the first time we really see something like this.
Interesting. Yeah, I keep thinking like, well, this is unique, but it's no longer weird. Unique to us because every abduction scenario almost is like this. And so
it was unique back then.
Yeah. And so this scenario is interesting because it's like they obviously didn't copy it, but the fact that everyone's like, well, this is the template for alien abduction. Now I'm just like, everyone else just be copying these two.
But but it's weird. Like, well, you'll see. Like the strangeness that happens is it's funny and just bizarre. We'll push on though. As they were walking from their car to the ship, Betty recalled the following. She says, this is during one of her regressions, "I'm struggling to wake up. I'm at the bottom of a deep well and I gotta get out. Everything is black. I'm fighting to become conscious. Slowly and gradually, I start to become conscious. I struggle to open my eyes for a moment and then they close again. I keep fighting. I'm dazed and I have a far away feeling. Then I win the battle and my eyes are opened. I am amazed." End quote. It's interesting that so Betty was able to actually break through more or less this trance-like state that they had her. She was kind of conscious the whole time and she's very eagerly trying to fight it. And she's able to break through before they even make it over to the ship. Meanwhile, Barney is not whatsoever. And it's interesting because in hypnotherapy as well, Betty is harder.
I was just thinking that.
Correct. Betty is much harder to bring into a deeper trance than Barney. So if there's similar tactics for whatever's happening, I do wonder if Betty is just more of a harder-headed person to kind of put under. From here, she goes on to try and wake Barney up, but he remains completely unresponsive. So I'm actually going to play a clip from one of Betty's hypno sessions where she describes what happens next.
Did we keep walking? And I try to wake Barney up again. He said, Barney, wake up. And he doesn't. So the man said, he asked me again. He said, is Barney his name? Then I would ask him, so that he says, don't be afraid. You don't have any reason to be afraid. We're not going to harm you. But we just want to do some tests. When the tests are over with, we'll take you and Barney back and put you in your car, and you'll be on your way back home in no time.
And that was left it there because she kind of goes on to keep kind of going over that part. But so, yeah, she snaps out of it and she keeps calling for Barney to wake up. And there's one of them that seems to be able to speak their language. And he speaks English in a very heavily accented tone. And when she calls for Barney, he asks, oh, is Barney his name? Is Barney his name? And she refuses to acknowledge it until at the end where she's like, what are we doing? And they told him not to be afraid. So that's what happened after she snapped out of, more or less, after her little trance there.
These guys are liars because then Barney dies.
8 years later, though. 8 years later.
That could be. But he died because you're telling me earlier he got dick circle and then he died.
But the dick circle, we don't even know if the dick circle's related.
After that, and then he died.
I'm just saying. I have lots of thoughts.
Maybe he was just,
I think they lied to her. I think these aliens are dicks.
Maybe he just ate a lot of processed foods.
They might have. What was that, Alex?
Maybe he just ate a lot of processed foods.
It's just, that was it. That was the end of his life.
Like if I got abducted by aliens, I might change my dietary habits and not go outside as much. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I might be afraid as shit to go outside after that. Yeah, I might be really nervous.
Yeah.
Regardless, after that walk to the craft, after that short walk, they were brought to the craft, rather. And the craft itself was an oval metallic vehicle that landed on the ground. The rim of the oval ship was tilted slightly down, and a ramp extended from that lip down to the ground. At this point, they had gripped Betty due to her actually being awake and actually put up a little bit of a fight to try and break free. But she ripped her dress in the process in a small struggle. But as they reached the ship at this point, Betty thought to herself, quote, the heck with it. I don't have any control here. They've already got Barney close to being on board, so I might as well stop fighting and go ahead and behave myself. End quote. And so she stepped aboard the craft with the other figures, and Barney was dragged along behind. As the two were quickly separated into different rooms, in Barney's recollection of this, he said the following, quote, I'm out of my car and I'm going down the road into the woods. There's an orange glow. There's something there. Oh, if only I had my gun. What do they want? The crazy eyes are with me. They're with me. We go up a ramp. My feet just bumped and I'm in a corridor. I don't want to go and I don't know where Betty is. The eyes are telling me to be calm. I'll be calm. I'll be calm. If I'm not harmed, I won't strike out, but I will strike out if I am harmed in any way. I'm numb. I'm numb. I have no feeling in my fingers. My legs are numb. End quote.
I do not like the eyes. I do not like that at all.
The eyes consistently present in his mind, more or less, the way they kind of keep him subdued. So the rooms that they were brought into resembled that, as they described, as a hospital operating room. The bright overhead light gave a faint blue glow, and the rooms each had an examining table that they were laid upon and left alone for a little while before the creatures ended up returning. From this point, a sort of typical medical examination takes place for both of them, including a traditional neurological exam that took place with what looked to be an EEG without an actual tracing machine attached to it. I'm going to go through their individual experiences here because, again, suffice to say, I think Barney got the shaft. We'll start with Betty. After she's brought into her room, Betty's dress and shoes are removed, and she is forced to lie on an examination table. The leader, this is something she continually calls them, by the way. The leader is the one that can communicate with them.
This was the guy that was hanging back earlier?
Yep, the guy that was talking with them and all that stuff. The leader, the only one that can seemingly communicate in heavily accented English, begins to scrape her skin and examine her mouth. The skin flakes are taken and placed onto a fine cloth, gently folded, and then taken away. Earwax, hair clippings, and nail clippings are also taken while being reassured that nothing is going to hurt her and that she'll be fine. She is then given a neurological exam before the final examination procedure has to happen. Being told they are checking for pregnancy, they take a long needle with what Betty describes as a wire at the end of it and inserted it directly into her navel.
Which end?
The needle part into her navel.
Had a nail? No, but I mean the nail.
Oh, the other end had a wire at the end of it. I'm going to play the second Betty clip as she explains this part.
And the examiner has a long needle in his hand. And I see the needle. And it's bigger than any needle I've ever seen. And I asked him what he's going to do with it. And he said, just a simple test to won't hurt me. And I asked him what. And he said he just wants to put it in my navel. And it's just a simple test. And I don't know it will hurt. Don't do it. Don't do it. And even though it won't hurt. And he sticks a needle into my navel. And said,
after begging them to take the needle out after they placed it in, telling them how much it hurts, it seemed to finally dawn on the leader that she was in some sort of pain, and he simply waved his hand in front of her eyes, and all the pain vanished completely, at which point they finished their examination and removed the needle. Betty described the sensation of the needle like being stabbed with a knife in the stomach. This is where things start to get a little bizarre for Betty, though. It's at this point the examiner attempts to remove her dress completely, and this is where the zipper ends up ripping. The examiner tried to take the dress off and meddled with the zipper in the back, but clearly was unable to figure out how it worked, tugging at it, pulling at the cloth, trying to pull it apart. So Betty reached behind herself and began to unzip it. Once it was clear how the zipper worked, the creature then reached up and helped her unzip it all the way where they were able to take the dress off. This hyper-technical alien creature had been completely baffled by a zipper on a dress.
I mean,
just did not understand it.
I kind of like that detail because it kind of like humanizes these guys a little bit. They're all just a bunch of little bald guys, right?
Yeah, so you basically the people about are these little bald people who are not talking to Betty. They're all mumbling to each other. And then one that seems to be the leader that's kind of keeping them calm and keeping them under control while discussing things with the others. And then one of the ones that doesn't speak English is trying to like take his dress off. She calls him the examiner. Just couldn't figure it out.
Yeah, it just seems so realistic to me. I don't know. Like it makes the whole story more believable to hear that things like that were going on, because it just seems like something you wouldn't consider in like a normal alien scenario that probably would happen. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's weird. It's funny as hell to think about the little grays just like tugging at the dress, just being like not able to comprehend how the hell this works.
They would be completely screwed on prom night. They would be done for.
It would be the best date for any father, though.
Yeah, that's true.
It's true.
They'd be like,
so after she takes her dress off, what they end up doing is examining her spinal column, seemingly counting the number of vertebrae that go from her neck down to her down to the bottom. And then afterward, that they're done with her, and she's left to sit there as the examiner leaves the room. The leader explains to Betty that they can only do one exam at a time, so the examiner headed out to go to Barney's room next, and she is left alone with the leader, where she engages in what can only be described as polite conversation. She tells the leader that no one is going to believe this experience, and she wants some kind of proof to bring back and show these people that she was indeed aboard this weird alien ship with real actual aliens. The leader at this seems bemused and asks Betty what she would like to take with her as evidence. And so Betty, looking around, grabs a book and asks to keep it. As she opens it, she describes it being written in vertical lines and varying thickness with symbols that she simply did not understand. She asked the leader if she could take this home, considering this being proof that nobody could refute. And the leader saw no harm and simply agreed to it. All the while, a smaller alien with a rounder head stands outside of her examining room, glaring at her with an unfriendly face the whole while. And when Betty was eventually brought off the ship, he took the book from her, not allowing her to take the book off the ship.
He's probably an unorthodox alien.
Yeah, just be like, yeah, take a book. Who cares?
Yeah.
I can't imagine, like, out of all the stories we always get, not one can I ever think of where an alien's like, yeah, take what you want. It's fine. You'd be good.
That seems so much more believable to me. Like,
Right?
why would they need to be like, we don't exist, don't tell anyone, you know? Like,
But then the mean, grumpy looking little alien boy said no and took it away.
maybe the smaller they are, the more distinguished they are. Maybe that's part of their culture.
That's it. The shorter, the higher in the power rankings.
Yeah, maybe that was his dad out there.
That was his dad. That was the leader's dad.
He was letting his son try like one interrogation.
All right,
It's like, your
one
English
catch
is
and
pretty good.
release.
Yeah,
We're
like
going fishing. He's taking his boy human fishing.
Yeah.
Just like one catch and release.
he's like, no.
Before he left the ship, though, Betty's curiosity in that room with the leader continued, inquiring the leader about his home planet. He asks in return if she knows anything about the universe, in which Betty replied some basics, but really not much else. He walks her over to a nearby wall and pulls forth from a tube an oblong map with lots of white dots with lines connecting them. Some of the lines solid and some of the lines dashed and dotted. Think of it, the thing that's best to compare it to in my mind, Jesse, think of and Alex, if you're familiar with it, the Star Wars tabletop RPG, you know, the galaxy map and all the trade routes and
like
shit
hyperspace
with the different
lanes.
dotted lines.
That's exactly what I was going to say. Yeah.
Exactly like that. He explains that all the dots.
All right, I'm being quiet. I have so many things that I'm like, wait, why? All right.
Okay. He explains that all the different dots are different stars in the universe. And Betty asked what all the lines were. And the leader explains that the solid lines are trade routes and the dotted lines are expeditions. Betty then asked the leader where he was from on the map, and he returned asked her if she knew where Earth was on the map, at which point she said no and was unable to point it out. He then answered that it would be pointless to point out where he was from on the map, as she had no idea even where they were on the map now.
Makes sense.
And then he put the map away, and that was the end of the discussion. While they were all talking, though, as the map is getting put away, a group of Greys come in all excited, mumming and humming to each other, and what Benny and Barney both described as a weird noise that came out of their mouth, and that's when they noticed the membrane when they made these particular noises, like a membrane in their mouth would flap back and forth.
Okay.
These Greys come back in the room with Betty and the leader, and they shuffle over to Betty and quickly begin to examine Betty's teeth without saying a word. Betty, obviously confused, looks over to the leader as to what's happening, and he simply explains that they are very confused. In the other room, Barney's teeth, he had been examined the whole time, and his teeth came out because he had dentures, and they were unsure why his teeth came out, but hers did not. So they were just in there trying to pull at her teeth and just being like, meep, 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 like, do these come out? Nope. And they were just completely baffled by what dentures were. She then explains when the leader then asked why his teeth came out and hers didn't, she explained that it was because of old age. And the leader then followed up with asking what age is. She does her best to explain that as time goes, they get older and eventually they pass. The leader then answers that they have no concept of age and time. There is no death for them in that way. He was also confused about the color yellow, as she was bringing up her favorite color because he asked. He was bringing up the color. She was bringing up the color of her favorite vegetable because he asked about vegetables as well, and she was trying to explain what vegetables were. And so it led into the idea of like, what is yellow? What is vegetables? They didn't have any understanding of what these foods were and certain colors were, which is a bizarre note because their ship did make yellow lights and orange lights in the sky. So them not knowing what yellow is, maybe it's a miscommunication. It's another very bizarre point between Betty and the leader. But this confusion as to what the color yellow is when their ship also kind of made that light is kind of bizarre.
These details only underline the reality of the story for me. They're so wackadoodoo crazy. It's like an improv scene about being in space. And I'm like, I believe it.
It's really a great improv scene.
What are vegetables? I don't know. Yeah, exactly. Yellow. What is yellow?
Afterward, Barney's examination finished up. They are led back to the car. A member of the crew took the book from her, as I stated earlier, and the leader informed her that she and Barney would not be allowed to remember the encounter. When Betty rebuked this notion, the leader replied, quote, "Maybe you will remember. I don't know. I hope you don't, but maybe you will. But it won't do you any good if you do because Barney won't. Barney won't remember a single thing. And not only that, if he should remember anything at all, he's going to remember it differently from you. And all you're going to do is get each other so confused you won't know what's going on. It would be better if you forget it anyway." End quote. The leader escorts Betty and Barney to the car, and the Hills check on Delcy, their dog, who they found curled up in a tight ball under their back seat. Then resume their journey home after another series of buzzing sounds. And that's where her abduction story ends. Before we continue, a big thank you to today's sponsor, Stamps.com. And let's face it, taking trips to the post office is probably not how you want to spend your time. Trust me, take it from me, I was literally just there to mail something off to the boys here, and I was in line for friggin' ever. That's why I recommend mailing and shipping online at Stamps.com. Stamps.com allows you to mail and ship anytime, anywhere, right from your computer. Send letters, ship packages, and pay a lot less with discounted rates from USPS, UPS, and more. Stamps.com has saved businesses thousands of hours and tons of money. With Stamps.com, you get the services of the post office and the UPS all in one place, plus huge discounts on mailing and shipping rates. Stop wasting time and going to the post office and go to Stamps.com instead. There's no risk. And with my promo code CHILL, you get a special offer that includes a 4-week trial plus free postage and a digital scale. No long-term commitments or contracts. Just go to Stamps.com, click on the microphone at the top of the homepage and type CHILL. That's Stamps.com, promo code CHILL. Stamps.com. Never go to the post office again. Barney's is a little different. Not massively, but he got a bit of a harder shaft. For one, he didn't have the leader there the whole time. Nobody was there to communicate with him. He was only being influenced through the eyes in his mind to keep him calm. After being taken aboard the ship, Barney is taken down the ship's corridor and into a room he describes as a hospital rating room, or a hospital operating room. Barney narrates his exam as the following, and we're just going to put Barney's own words as to what happened to him. Quote, "I felt my shoes being removed and my pants being opened, and I could hear a humming-like sound that they seemed to be making. They pulled my pants all the way down to where my legs were. I could feel them turning me over and putting something into my rectum. It was like a tube. It was not painful. I thought it was just a little larger than a pencil. I felt it go in very easily, and then it was withdrawn. They looked at my back as if they were counting my spinal column, much like they did with Betty. I felt something touch right at the base of my spine, like a finger pushing, a single finger. I could only hear this mum. And then he, in the actual audio, he just goes into this rapid humming noise. And he says, so this mum-like sound. And then I was turned over again, and my mouth was opened, and I could feel 2 fingers pulling it back. And then I heard as some men came in, and I could hear them rustling around the left side of the table as I was laying, and something scratched very lightly like a stick on my arm. And these men left, and I was left with what I thought were 3 men. The 2 that brought me in and the other one that seemed to follow these 2 men. I could tell that there was more than one person in the room, but only one man seemed to be moving around my body all the time. That's the end of his recollection of that point. Later, Barney recounted that the examiner also checked his ears, adding that the examiner seemed particularly interested in Barney's bone structure. Barney explains that something was placed around his genitals and that he felt a tug or a pressure or something, but he did not achieve erection, nor did he get to ejaculate. So it was just something tugging and pulling on his dick the whole time.
He thinks it was like a try at getting him to...
We don't know. We have no idea what it was. Yes would be my guess, but that's just because I'm using other abduction scenarios as to fill in for what I assume is happening. But it was in this area that the concentric ring of warts appeared. During the time of reliving the examination, the growths actually became inflamed, and that's why they initially had to be removed. Because as he was going through in the regression of the examination, his warts were just getting worse.
What?
They got inflamed via the regression hypnosis. Yeah, over the course of a few weeks and going through it. But over the course of a few weeks. The growths were removed for more cosmetic purposes than as a medical necessity. And after the medical exam is complete, he then too is escorted back to the car where he accidentally sits on his gun and checks on Delcy. He waits for Betty to enter the car, and when she does, they watch the UFO become a glowing orange ball and fly off. Barney negotiates the bend in the road and heads back to Route 3. They hear the rhythmic buzzing sounds again, and the missing time reconnects with conscious memory. So if we are to believe, if we take it all at face value, boys, that is what occurred during that 2-hour chunk of time that they were missing after their car got stopped.
Wow. I mean, that is, it's like a template, like a perfect template.
With weirdness involved and funny, bizarre aliens not understanding Earth stuff involved and all the things you would think kind of go along with it, with the added kind of twist of Betty's bizarre light like brunch talk.
I love the idea of them being alone in the room, so what do you got? Veggies? What's a vegetable? What the hell is that? I don't know.
It's great. It's so weird. So that was in 1964. After they finally, over the course of 6 months, were able to kind of put this together and find this peace, Barney truly seemed like he found peace in some regard. And while Dr. Simon at the end did not necessarily believe that this is exactly what happened, he was happy to see that it seemed to have at least have a positive effect on their lives. After 6 months of trekking to and from Dr. Simon's office, and despite still having lingering questions, Betty and Barney were feeling better. They threw themselves into their social and political agendas, and they promoted civil rights and fought to end discrimination. Through their civil work, this is all post-hypnosis life at this point, through their civil work with the Unitarian Church, the Hills were made envoys to the United Nations. Barney made several speeches across the eastern seaboard for the NAACP and was a frequent guest speaker at the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard.
No shit.
Betty threw herself into work for the Democratic Party in the 1964 election, and because of their tireless work, the Hills were invited guests at Lyndon B. Johnson's inaugural ceremonies.
What
Barney was given, fuck? Yeah, man. Barney was given some very prestigious positions due to his endless work with civil rights. In May of 1965, he was appointed to the New Hampshire State Advisory Committee to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights for a term ending on the 31st of December 1966. And in July 1965, he was nominated to the Human Rights Commission for the state of New Hampshire. Suffice to say, things started turning around. Unfortunately, it wouldn't last. In August of 1965, the Hills received a phone call from their friend Adele Dara saying that the reporter by the name of John Luttrell wanted to interview them concerning their abduction. The word of their story had gotten out since they had spoken to so many people about it, and now an actual article was going to be written about them. Betty and Barney Hill declined the interview, simply wanting to put the whole thing behind them. Luttrell called Barney, revealing that he knew personal facts about their lives and requested an appointment to discuss with them. Again, they denied. And Betty was afraid if their abduction story got out, then she might lose her job at the time, which was a child welfare worker at this particular point. And they found out later that despite denying them, Luttrell had still gone to their house while they were out and sat on their porch for over an hour and a half until eventually he left and got frustrated. Luttrell continued to pester the Hills, going through their friends to glean more information, basically playing telephone with anybody who might have heard anything from the Hills in terms of their story. And in response, Barney got into contact with 2 lawyers in an attempt to force a cease and desist. Unfortunately, he was informed that so long as his medical confidentiality isn't violated, that he had no legal recourse to stop Luttrell from digging into their lives.
That is insane.
Yeah, it sucks. Luttrell went behind the Hills' back and interviewed friends about the hypnosis. He actually acquired a copy of the Blue Book file and managed to get a copy of Walter Webb's final report on the situation without Webb's knowledge. Now, keep in mind, the Project Blue Book file, it says it's a scam. It said it was a hoax and that it was the tracking light. Remember that we talked about last time. So that's like the information he's getting from these side things. Armed with all of this, Luttrell felt he had more than enough to go ahead and write the article with or without the Hills interview, despite repeatedly failing to get in touch with them. And on Monday, October 25th, 1965, the Hills' worst fears were realized. They were inundated with international phone calls asking questions about the article in the Boston Traveler named the UFO Chiller. Did they seize the couple? Reporters and civilians mobbed the couple trying to get more information every day. At one point, they actually took solace over at Pease Air Force Base because one of the lieutenants they had befriended wanted to get them out of the media circus and just give them a day without the chaos. And that was, Betty recalls in one of her later interviews in later life, as one of the more peaceful days of that era because of how relentlessly they had been hounded once this article hit.
That is crazy.
Yeah, it's a shitty thing to do. After the article went live in the papers, the Hills visited family nearby to let them know what was going on and to get their positions on it. On their way home, they reported that they saw a red-orange light bouncing directly in front of their vehicle about 200 yards back from the highway. It traveled over a nearby pond, across an adjacent field, and over the treetops, ascending and descending over the trees at different heights. Clearly remembering the event from 4 years ago, Barney braked the car and the craft stopped as well. It rocked back and forth, then landed behind a nearby wooded area. The Hills went to go investigate, but the craft had landed across a stretch of impassable swampland. They had no desire to risk approaching it in the dark, so they went back to their car, and they began to wonder if the beings had abducted them were coming back because the story had become public. The response to the article was immense, and there were 3,000 requests for reprints, and since requests for additional information were beginning to snowball, they decided to speak publicly about the incident for the very first time. On the 7th of November, 1965, they had an open forum at the Pierce Memorial Unitarian Universalist Church in the neighboring city of Dover. 400 seats were filled, with people standing in the hallways, the basement, and outside hoping to learn more about their alien tale. The Hills were introduced by Lieutenant Alan Brandt, the public information officer at Pease Air Force Base. The lieutenant was dressed in uniform and explained that the Air Force took UFO reports seriously and that all sightings should be reported. Betty and Barney Hill took the stage next, and they said they would, and in fact could, only speak to their conscious memory and nothing else. Barney explained that the publication of the article had happened without their cooperation or even consent, and that they had hoped to maintain confidentiality about the whole experience. After they finished speaking, they opened up to the floor to questions and the session, which lasted more than an hour. One person actually asked Barry if he was happy to be there, and the response was, quote, "My wife says to say I'm happy to be here, so I'm happy to be here."
Damn.
End quote. Everyone ended up laughing. And we know in the end, 3 years later, Barney would pass away. And for the next few decades, Betty would go out trying to research more about UFOs, doing more question and answers at conventions and stuff like that, and helping as much as she could in her political life as well. But that's the end of the Betty and Barney Hill aspect of the story. The last thing we want to talk about is, of course, a few of the theories as to what people believe it is, what you boys believe happened, if anything at all. And that will end the Betty and Barney Hill series here on Chilluminati. So the first one, the one that's kind of predominant, is the dream theory. As I stated earlier in this episode, Betty started having really bad nightmares when during the couple of years where they were trying to figure out what happened. And they would wake up Barney as well. She'd have him very vocal. One of the theories is that Barney took her dreams over the course of months, and it kind of sat into his subconscious. And that is what ended up filling those 2 hours during those hypnotherapies, was he was pulling memories of what he remembered Betty was having as part of the nightmare. The issue is that what he recollects and what she was dreaming don't line up. However, what he recollects and what Betty recollects under hypnosis does line up. So, because the dream is off, the dream is not, it's very dreamlike. There's aspects of it that fit their regression, and then there are aspects of it that just don't match whatsoever. However, their hypnotic regressions both line up pretty fucking close 1-to-1. So that's kind of the theory as far as that is concerned. The other theory is that there are a ton of people that stick to the light in the sky theory, that it was simply just, if it wasn't something advertising something, it was a light being driven by a truck being brought somewhere to advertise something the next day. And that's what the light in the sky ended up being.
But how does that like connect? Like, is the idea that they like that both are true, that they like had a freak out on the side of the road and then later were like, it's your dreams?
Yeah, they're saying the freak out on the side of the road caused Betty's dreams, and then Betty's dreams were
like reciprocated back into being.
Yeah, exactly. Which doesn't, again, I don't really think that makes any sense. There's another theory out there that, and I don't prescribe to this theory whatsoever. It doesn't make much sense to me, but there's a few out there who fully believe that there was a rape scenario that happened in the woods, that Barney like raped his own wife. And people point to the physical evidence of the ripped zipper, the ripped dress, the scuffed shoes. However, it's just listening to their hypnotherapy and other evidence and the way their relationship was prior and after. I don't know. I mean, you can't say it's not, but it doesn't seem to line up in terms of like when you listen to both of their therapy sessions.
Like who brought that up? Like who?
I couldn't tell you where it originated. Only that it is online. Like you can go research, like read like big takes, like opinion pieces.
But it's not based on like something Betty said to someone.
No, only based on what they kind of take as like traumatic experiences and people turning them into something that it wasn't. They point to the science experiments being replacements for the physical assault that happened on them and whatnot. So
that would be the worst possible outcome of this.
Yeah, agreed. It doesn't seem like anybody in the family on that side seems to believe that that's what was the case either. And even after Barney died for decades, that Betty never brought that up as something that seemed to happen.
Right.
And then finally, there's a theory that maybe they ran into the last two theories rather. Maybe they ran into, as we talked about briefly, maybe it was some sort of government thing. Maybe there was a secret government like testing plane that flew over and landed, and they got all kinds of like freaked out, and they, were being essentially kidnapped by people, and they just kind of warped it in their mind to be something else. The trauma response of the brain made it so it turned it into a scenario that was way more wild and way more otherworldly, but it was easier for them to maybe process over the course of the years and months the months and years that end up following. And the last one is they simply had a nervous breakdown. They might have saw a light in the sky, a satellite passing by, and what I think Jesse kind of described last episode as mass hysteria took place, where maybe Betty thought it was one thing, or maybe Barney thought it was one thing, and they coaxed the other through their panic to believe that they too are seeing the same thing, and that kind of they feed each other, and their wild imaginations kind of take over from there, maybe traumatizing themselves in some way. Regardless, what theory you prescribe to, we don't have a definitive answer. We do know, though, that Barney did get sick. Like things happened to him physically, and there was physical evidence that something happened to them on that particular night, with the car weirdness that other people witnessed, the pile of leaves that showed up in their house with a missing earring return, all that stuff. It's weird. It's weird. But much like alien stories kind of go, that's where we pull our hands from it and say, that's all we really have. I would suggest if you want way more details, please go read Captured, go read The Journey, like all the books that we kind of talked about.
The Interrupted Journey or whatever it's called.
The Interrupted Journey is another. Yeah.
I don't know that you can ever truly pull away, though. Like this is a thing that it makes sense yet totally doesn't, right? Like going through everything you described with, I wrote down a ton of notes, like just going through everything you described with Betty and her scenario and what was going on. Like it makes for a great story. But if you look at, like, I have so many questions, like, why did she recognize it as a hospital room from like, or I guess maybe Barney did too, but why do they recognize it a hospital room from like the 1960s? Why is that like their immediate, like, oh yeah, it's an operating room. Like, does alien technology look like a 1960s hospital room? Or
I imagine they described it like that because it was just clean and like clear of anything other than a light overhead and a table.
Our definitions of what a hospital room is are totally different from 1960s hospitals.
Sure, agreed. Yeah.
When she talks about a large needle, if you can travel intergalactic, why do you have large ass needles?
Maybe it was like one of those prop, like
I mean, like
where it folds
if you can travel, if you can travel intergalactic, why do you have a rollout paper map with like dots and shit? Like if the one guy talked to her in a strange accent, like,
you think there's too many 60s features in this futuristic spaceship?
Well, all I'm saying is, I would more likely believe that in 20 years, if someone came out and said this was an MK Ultra experiment, they found these people and literally tortured them, and one of them later died because of whatever drug they put in his ass.
Sure.
I would believe that more than an alien. Like, I would believe the U.S. government did something to these people more than I would believe that an alien did. Because, like, even when you described, the first thing I thought of when you're like, so later on, after this all came out, they're driving down the road and they see a light.
Yep.
And then when they stop, the light stops. The first thing I think of is like, oh, it's a reflection in the car. One of the lights on the inside of the car is hitting the window.
That's happened a bunch.
And when they stop, the car rocks back and forth. And they see the light rock back and forth in the window. And then when they get out, it's like gone. And they're like, oh, it went down, so we're going to go look for it. Like, it makes perfect sense that way. Like, it just seems like, going back to the thing I said last time, it's comforting, for Barney to hear, oh, I was abducted. All these things happened, because at least he knows what happened. But I don't know that's what happened. Like, I would say abduction definitely occurred. I would agree with that.
I agree.
But I don't know that it was aliens. I think it more likely is like any number of other insane things that could have happened to a couple on the back roads of America. Yeah.
But if you want to take the fucking Mathis view, the Mike view of things,
the one where aliens are real.
But instead of assuming that these aliens are purely from like another planet and in our realm of existence, what if there's a psychical element? What if they are from another dimension? That would help explain.
They're from another dimension, and they can travel dimensions, and they still have paper maps.
Well, like, I wonder, like, again, we don't know how it works, but it would also explain the weirdness of not understanding zippers, of like the teeth thing, which is fucking hilarious in my mind. Is this fucking Grey's waddle in?
That stuff makes me the most convinced. To me, this one to me reminds me a lot of the one that I did a couple months ago, the Robert Taylor with the where it grabbed his pants and the police came.
Very similar vibes.
I like both of them because they both have super weird details that don't really mean anything. They're just weird things that would happen in that type of scenario. Like if I was telling you the time, the one time I was in Vegas and I randomly met Putin, or some shit like that. I don't know. I would be he had this weird thing with his pinky and I think one of his guys farted. I would, those are the things that would stick out to me. And I feel like because these guys obviously had better things to do in their lives, they wanted to go organize for civil rights and speak for.
Yeah, that's what their lives were.
I feel like they really weren't into it, in it for the fame about the alien stuff. They didn't really capitalize off of it really themselves, right? No. The same thing with Robert Taylor. He was I don't even talk about it. I don't want anybody to talk to me about it. I never want to talk about it. Yeah.
That was Barney's whole vibe, man. He hated it. Betty was the only one that wanted to talk about it because she was just intensely curious as to what the hell happened. But Barney seriously ruined him in so many ways. He truly hated the experience. And even when you read about him on the doing occasional talks, he clearly didn't want to necessarily be there, but he was pulled into it with this article being written. He could no longer escape it. And then this kind of became his life until he passed.
Yeah, there's a documentary about the Golden State Killer.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one of the guys who's like, he survived the attack, and he's just obviously damaged. And he has that same tone of voice that Barney has in his like little hypnosis recordings of just like this sort of like, it's hard to fake that. You know what I mean? Like
the broken, scared as hell.
Yeah. It's hard
terrified.
to like, just like roll up and be like, deliver a performance beyond any actor that I've ever seen. You know what I mean? Like,
especially for a guy who's working for the USPS in the 60s.
That's what I'm saying. Like there's some trauma there for sure. And I'm not saying I believe that aliens have visited us in any specific way. Right. I don't think there's been any definitive evidence, period, that aliens have ever been here, like for real. Like there's lately been some pretty crazy stuff, which I'm sure we'll talk about in the minisode. But like, it's just like, I don't know, if there are some true stories, I feel like the ones like Betty and Barney Hill and like Robert Taylor are the ones that I'm willing to believe over other ones.
I agree. And, at the end of the day, I kind of agree with Jesse, regardless of whether it was aliens or strangers in the woods or government. I truly believe these two people were abducted by something.
It's you could easily say that strange accent plus like not knowing. I mean, other countries do not use the word yellow. Like, yellow.
These Russians are like, what do you mean yellow? We don't
is it like
it's
like Ziply or something?
There's no color that happy for us here.
And like, look, let's be real. Zippers can get stuck. All I'm saying is like all these interesting facts do not necessarily prove that they didn't know how to do these things. It just means that whoever she talked to, like it could. What if it was like, I am big American man. It's no problem.
What is vegetable? What is vegetable? You have this.
It was the height of the Cold War. All I'm saying is
you never know.
Also,
did you
know that their granddaughter, Angela Hill, is like number 11 strawweight UFC women's?
Yeah, she's MMA fighter.
Yeah, and she's also like a gamer and cosplayer.
Did you also know potential Russian spy? Just putting it out there. There.
Just putting it out there.
Well-planted Russian spy.
Oh shit.
I hope you guys enjoyed the Betty and Barney Hill case. Again, out there, listeners, if you want more, the books give you so much more detail. This is just kind of the long and short of it with as much as I can get to you. But it's a fascinating read to just hear about everything that they went through over the years after the abduction and just kind of the hell that they went through. So if you want more, go check it out. It's a great read. But thank you guys for letting me do another alien episode. It's been a while. So getting that out of my system was just... It felt good. It felt real good.
I love that.
We will be back next week with a special guest, everybody.
Oh, man.
Don't you worry.
I can't wait for this guest. And also, if you are listening to us right now and you're like, man, this is the end of the podcast already. Oh, man, guess what? You can get like 15, 20 minutes more right now by heading over to patreon.com/Chilluminati and getting that mini-sode right now, right into your ear holes.
It's true.
We're about
and
to
if
record
you
it.
have never signed up before, you've got like 40 mini-sodes you can just binge while you're over there.
It's a lot.
Plenty of content.
It's more than you think.
It is. It is. It's more than I think most of the time. I'm always surprised.
He's always like, I got to dip into the mini-sodes again for an episode. I have to like move states. And I'm like, we have so many.
Do it. And then I'm like, oh, we have like 20 backed up. We're fine. We will be back next week with that special guest, everybody. Be excited. I don't even know what we're doing yet. He hasn't even told me.
Is he the one who's pulling the topic?
He told me he was going to give me a topic and I was just going to do the research for it and do it. But he hasn't given me anything yet. So if he doesn't give me anything in the next 2 days, I'm just going to pick something really weird and just do something really weird with him on the show.
Okay.
So no names being dropped, y'all. You'll be surprised.
Gauntlet has been thrown.
The gauntlet has been thrown. We will see you all next week. And if you're a Patreon, we'll see you in a few minutes. Thank you guys so much for listening. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Anyway, me and my wife were sitting outside indulging on our porch one night, enjoying ourselves. I needed to go to the bathroom, so I stepped back inside, and after a few moments, I hear my wife go, "Holy shit, get out here." So I quickly dash back outside, and she's looking up at the sky in awe. I look up too, and there's a perfect line of dozen lights traveling across the sky.